Hey everyone, welcome to Powertime. Let's have a listen to what's on today's show. Concept of we might even step into a world one day where every employee has their own personal agent and
they all have these roadmaps, and that balances keeping things evergreen, keeping the legacy running well, with introducing new capabilities. And so that trade-off, that balance, broadly speaking, the vision for Westpac is that we want to make artificial intelligence a real important plank of our deepening our relationship with our customers.
Well, we start with a big question first, right?
Why not?
Get that over and done with. What's going to happen to the industry?
Look,
Let's get into it.
It's power time. Get ready, let's go.
Hey everyone, welcome to Power Time. I'm joined with a really special guest today, the CTO from Westpac, David Walker. And it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast, David. Maybe you can give us a few minutes about yourself and your journey at Westpac, and then we can get into some of the details around Westpac and what you're doing around the AI space.
Hey, Scott, Matt, great to be here. Good to see you again as well. So, Yes, Group CTO at Westpac, have been here for 6 years. My journey in technology and banking is 38 years long, a little bit of experience there in terms of navigating different parts of my career. Started off as a software engineer, assembly language, mainframes.
Awesome.
Went into the data business, ran my own data consultancy, which you now call data science. It wasn't called data science back then. That became trendy later. And then sort of entered into my executive career, which was all been large companies, banks, both here in Australia and up in Asia. And Westpac's all been about transforming a great bank in Australia, into becoming an even greater bank.
Yeah, it's Westpac's really been on the forefront of AI, and you know when you have a look at AI and what's going on in Westpac, what's your vision and how do you think AI is going to really reshape, I guess, financial services over the next few years moving forward?
Yeah, big question there, Scott.
Well, we start with the big question first, right?
Like, why not?
Get that over and done with. What's going to happen to the industry?
Look, I think no doubt everyone, unless you've been living under a rock, has been focused on thinking about how they apply artificial intelligence. We've been on that journey for a number of decades at Westpac, but more recently, the newer forms of AI that started off with the transformer breakthrough and which when became large language models and so forth, about 3 years now. So we were even pre-Chat GPT, we were working with some of that technology, and we could see right from the very first day the power of what that was going to do. And so we worked with a couple organizations, one being Microsoft, and started working on how do we start applying this? What's the use cases? How do we think about that? And we collected use cases from all around the organization, built up a repository of hundreds of these, and started thinking about, well, we can't build 100 of these from scratch. That's a lot of scale going from zero to that. So we started thinking about what do the patterns look like? How do we get repeatable patterns? And that was been a huge step forward for us. So we've been building these patterns of technology out, which has been great. Broadly speaking, the vision for Westpac is that we want to make artificial intelligence a real important plank of our deepening our relationship with our customers. We see how it's going to help us become better at supporting our customers through different experiences, through freeing up our bankers' time, through productivity gains, providing better technology through software engineering at a faster rate. Everywhere we go, everywhere we look, AI is going to help give our customers a better outcome through direct or indirectly. And so that's where we are really focused. I think the finance sector in general, this technology is still at the infancy. We're going to see breakthroughs continue at the rate that we've seen over the last 2-3 years. And so it's very hard to predict how soon and how quick, but I can see a day coming where artificial intelligence is going to be creating this idea of what I'm calling a my digital twin, this concept of a customer representation that lives inside our company on behalf of the customer, acting on their behalf, something that we can communicate with, which will interact with the customer and vice versa. And we think this is a really powerful idea that brings the technology to life for our customers and looks after our customers in a very unique way.
Yeah, I think when we look at the financial services industry, and Matt and I talk about a lot on the podcast, that industry, mainly because I've got like 20 years experience in it myself. So, and my whole team's across it. So it's for us, we see a lot of use cases, a lot of potential when it comes to agents. And of course, we're recording this on the day that ChatGPT 5 has just dropped this morning. Which looks phenomenal already, straight out of the gate, and supported by Microsoft on day zero, which is great. And so, I could see so many use cases, I think, moving forward as this kind of technology gets smarter and smarter over the next few years. Or actually, I was talking about it last night with a few friends of ours, and, we have this concept of we might even step into a world one day where every employee has their own personal agent. And so your agent communicates with their agent and handles a lot of that mundane kind of admin stuff that we need.
Well, that's the fundamental idea behind the My Digital Twin piece. It's essentially, and I think it goes, the technology to make that happen has to go beyond just agents. It's the culmination of things like knowledge graphs and the ability to understand who you are in context, but a context over a long period of time. So you can see how, technologies over the last decade have given us this position we're in where we can reimagine a whole host of new capabilities to represent, as you said, your vision, your digital version of yourself operating inside in multiple companies, acting on your behalf. And, my digital twin will talk to your digital twin and off they go and they'll go sort out some stuff. Whether that's everything from travel to I need to make a payment or I want to create a new bank account to operate in this way. And you can just see the power of that coming to life over the next few years.
Yeah, 100%. So,
okay, so a question for me, David, is how do you prioritize between sort of modernizing that legacy stack that you alluded to before and then being at the forefront of all these new initiatives like you alluded to before with that? I think, how do you strike that balance about with that? So, yeah.
Yeah, look, it's that balance is always there, whether it's artificial intelligence or any new forms of modernization. You've got to keep the current technology stack alive and going well. And the first and foremost job of anyone in a organization like ours is to ensure that the lights are on well and truly. It's a safe and it's operating as expected, and that's tied up a lot in making sure the legacy, as you call it, is healthy, is running and evergreen, and so we continue to put a huge amount of energy into that piece because you're not doing what you need to do for your customers if you're not operating a banks in that mode. So that's almost job one to do, is to ensure the safety and this reliability of your banking systems. Clearly, though, job two is striving to build out new capabilities to bring them on, and the flavor of the month right now, and probably the flavor of the next few years, will be how do you apply artificial intelligence in a sensible way. And so it's always going to be about striking balance, and any large organization like ours is doing that all the time, every day, understanding when to move forward, when not to move forward, and so we're very focused on building roadmaps right across our whole enterprise. We have 50-odd roadmaps. The business own those roadmaps. They're signed up to them. And that lays out a path for the mortgages business or the financial markets business or the HR systems in the back of the bank helping our people out. They all have these roadmaps. And that balances keeping things evergreen, keeping the legacy running well with introducing new capabilities. And so that trade-off, that balance, mixed against cost to serve, is the risks that we've got in the systems, the competitive nature that we want in the marketplace. There's multiple levers that we're constantly looking at and adjusting to make those decisions.
It's interesting because I know whenever my team goes in to do a demo or to any of the big four banks, really, the very next question is always by the architects. That's great. It looks good. It looks good in greenfields, but is it going to work in our environment where it's complex and we've got legacy systems and legacy security and all sorts of things? So I think at the end of the day, it's not just about being able to, come up with a system that's going to work really well. It's got to work in a really complex environment most of the time, which, let's face it, in banking, there's a lot of complex environments that we have to navigate through.
Yeah, 100%, Scott. There, it's one of the things that I communicate to all our partners is, look, we'd love to hear your ideas, bring them to us because they do form a lot of our forward thinking. But when it comes time to make a decision of implementing it, it needs to be on the roadmap. We can't just turn right and left. We need to know when to do that, and don't waste your time or ours. Because it's time consuming. So it's about sequencing and making sure that alignment's there, and the best partners know how to do that really, really well with us. And I think that's a really key feature of working together in a collaborative way.
Any tips for anyone that might be listening that's working in the FSI industry around, how to partner better or work within those systems?
Yeah, look, I think walk in our shoes, and we try and walk in your shoes as well. Is always the key thing there. I know when you're sitting sometimes in a office and you're thinking up, well, I've got a client out there and I've got this product. Let's go work out how best to get it in there. But the best ones always come and try and solve our problems, work out where it's on the roadmap, when would that capability be taking an upgrade and things like that. Doesn't mean we're not, as I said, interested to hear new ideas and when new things come about, because that's how we learn as well. But at the same time, actually understanding how to fit into our environment is really key. And that's not just when and what capability, but it's also being very aware that we're a regulated organization. We have very high bar when it comes to security and managing the quality of our operational systems to make sure they're so resilient, reliable. So come to us with products that are mature enough to fit into those environments. Those are things. So again, it all comes back to understanding us and understanding what it takes, and not just imagining I've got this great product, surely everyone will want to buy it. More, how will it fit and what's the right fit for us at the right time.
I feel like we partner the best when we focus on business problems that you've got within your business unit, and can we address that and then look at the tech kind of secondary. And as long as we're talking about enterprise platforms, we should be able to tackle the integration and the security and the compliance and things like that. But it's when we center around that business process or how we can really, help your employees work better. I feel like that's where we're in the pocket with that kind of the most success.
Yeah. Well, with technology, banks are largely a technology company. Most of the products we sell and the services we provide to our customers are technology. So, we do love working with companies that are really technical and capable of bringing technology to us. But actually, what it is about solving a problem for our customers or solving a problem for our business in a way that makes sense. It's the technology is really interesting, and as technologists, we're fascinated about how to make that better and more efficient and safer and secure. But at the end of the day, we're solving business problems, and people that understand that and appreciate that, because that's what we're doing as technologists. We're solving business problems. They help us solve those business problems. Is the key.
Yeah, 100%.
Definitely. So you mentioned before partnerships and tech vendors and the like. I guess Westpac's a heavy Microsoft house. I guess, can you talk about the way that your Westpac is leveraging sort of the Microsoft ecosystem, the Copilot products, Azure, all those types of things?
Yeah, absolutely. We are, Microsoft has been a wonderful partner over many, many years, and we certainly couldn't be where we are without the support of Microsoft, both from the products and the services that you provide across a whole range of things. We could probably spend a few hours covering them all, but Azure is obviously where Azure is our biggest cloud partner at the moment. We're deeply entrenched there. We have all our data safely and securely managed in the Azure environment. We're building out on Cloud Foundry there, so Azure Foundry, which has been a great work, and we've created some experimentation zones just recently on there. We're adopting ML Studio at great length. We've had that up and operational now around our AI and data platforms for some time since it first came out. We've been a Power Platforms user, Copilot Studio. And I think probably if I do a bit of joint bragging, we've done some really great work in partnership with Microsoft and your EY partner, or our EY partner together. So the three of us have got together and rolled out Microsoft 365 Copilot across the organization. I've been looking at some of the results in terms of the adoption rates, and I think we're benchmarked pretty much right at the top of the global benchmarks in terms of adoption across all customers that Microsoft have there. I think, which is outstanding work, which means, at the end of the day, talking about the business problem, means our staff, thousands and thousands of our staff are now using that and getting value out of it. They're actively using it, and the benchmark data is showing that consistently, which is great.
It's interesting when you look at Copilot Studio, because originally it started off as Power Virtual Agent, and then we introduced, obviously, language models and AI into that and rebranded to Copilot Studio at Microsoft. But, it really wasn't a thing 2 years ago. And if it wasn't for the foundational work around governance, compliance, most of our FSI customers wouldn't be able to move that fast. So it's great that it kind of just fitted into the ecosystem and allowed for you to be able to really just turn it on and know that you're going to be able to comply with all the regulations that you need to.
Yeah.
So.
And one absolutely. And one of the other big call outs is GitHub, Copilot. We were strong early adopters of that, and our software engineers have been loving using that. And we certainly as an organization have been loving it too, because they're getting to write more code, better quality code, and they love working with it. So I think, right across the whole range, we've had some really good successes with Microsoft over the years, and we'll continue to.
So pivoting a bit from the technology, David, let's talk a little bit about the culture. How do you kind of balance, innovation within Westpac, as well as encourage, that innovation to thrive, but also deal with compliance and things like that? We've talked about, it's a heavily regulated industry, as everyone knows, in FSI, but how do you really guide your teams around this?
Yeah, innovation is such a critical element. If you want to be a company that's going to transform, and quite frankly, every company has to transform. You have to continue to strive to be better. And if you haven't got innovation built in as a foundational DNA element within your company, then that's not going to allow you to sort of bring in that new capability all the time, those new ideas all the time. And so I'm quite privileged to run a group called Westpac Growth Labs, which is our R&D unit for the bank. They're an amazing small group of people that have done phenomenal work. And the key thing with that is they're not the innovation department. It's not the place you go to do innovation. What they are is they're the innovation enablers. They're the team that actually allow everyone else to innovate at scale. And so this is something that I learned in my work up in Singapore and DBS. We changed our definition of innovation from being a place to go do the lab work, but to do the place that actually allows other people to learn and grow and become a whole company innovation unit. And so that's what we've done here at Westpac, and Growth Labs has been able to help unlock people's mindset. One of the things that I would probably call out as an example is we're just right now running live this AI Shark Tank, and we're doing that right across the whole company. So the 30 to 40,000 employees of Westpac now can work on put ideas through for the AI Shark Tank and be competitive, and that was all run by Growth Labs. And it started with, how do you teach people right across the whole company, everyone, what is artificial intelligence, but also how to innovate, how to think innovative, how do you pitch your ideas, how to create ideas, how do you, I can see problems. Well, how do you turn a problem into a pitch? So we've taught people how to do that. And so that's foundational, creating innovation. And we're at the stage now where we've got thousands of ideas have come in. We've now whittled them down to the top 20, and they're going through technical labs right now to help develop their AI ideas into something. And then the final 8 will go through to the Sharks, which will include our CEO, who will pick a winner or some winners, which will then get developed into real live use cases. And so that's about creating innovation as a culture across the company. Like, we love the ideas and we love the fact it's AI, but it's actually about helping people unlock themselves. Now, you asked, how do you balance that with compliance and so forth around, how do we manage that sort of things? Of course, we can't. So in the innovation world, we can't just have a free-for-all where you can just bring customer data down and use that as part of innovation. So we very clearly have innovation environments and labs that lock down but providing data and access to that data in a way that makes the data free and easy to use. So we put a lot of work into creating labs that allow people to innovate using real data but remain completely compliant. And I think, we're pretty excited about how we can now scale those from ideas, innovations, right through to pilots, right through to live in production and scale. And so that whole pipeline from innovation through to live in production has to start with the compliance lens all the way along. And so it's got to have the security built in from day one. It's got to have the privacy considerations across the data from day one. It's got to have all the sort of normal other regulation things that we consider from day one. So even in an experiment environment, we're already starting to think about that to allow us to scale through.
Yeah, and I really like that initiative. It's a great way for. I mean, we've spoken about this on the podcast before. There might be just that one person who comes up with that one idea that makes a massive difference for the company, and it's about how can you give them the tools and the opportunity really to express that idea. So, the Shark Tank sounds like a fantastic way to do that. So.
Yeah, completely agree. I guess that role of innovation and driving and building a lot of these AI initiatives, I guess, how are you foreseeing the role of a software engineer in the world of AI? You mentioned before GitHub, Copilot and the like. Like, what's kind of your opinion, your direction that you're kind of foreseeing that your technical team is going to undertake moving forward?
Yeah, look, software is going to probably one of the very early areas that gets the most amount of change going forward. If I go back a little bit in time, Matt, we were one of the very early adopters in the GitHub space and for Copilot, and we ran the Growth Labs ran an experiment for us. And as unlike, say, other areas of the bank, like operations, where you're doing repeating tasks, it's the same task, and you can sort of measure different pathways and see what's more optimum. You're not software engineering. You never typically write the same piece of code twice, right? Once it's written, it's written. So it's very hard to get that benchmark of how you're going faster or not. So actually in Growth Labs, what we did was we pulled 40 engineers off the line for a week and broke them into 4 teams and gave 3 of those teams tools like Copilot, and then 1 team just had to code by hand. And so we were able to measure a whole host of things during that week and they had to write exactly the same code, essentially. They had to get the same problem solved or a series of problems solved. And so in that week, we were able to measure like-for-like comparisons, everything from how do they feel about using this? What's the adoption, and how do they feel about having use of this sort of technology, right the way through to real genuine how fast they could do it, the productivity gains that they could get from it. And we were amazed at the results that we saw. And so this was a real true go back to university style experiment. And from that, then we said, look, it's obvious we need to take this. The gains were just so dramatic. The training, the education it gave the junior developers, the speed, the toil it took away from the more experienced engineers, and so we've been up and running and measuring that now through an external productivity tool. So we measure billable coding effort, and this billable coding effort gives us a number of hours of valuable code that's written a day by each engineer, and we can see those engineers that are pre GitHub Copilot, and then once they move and transition onto it, post. And so we're seeing anything up to 40% gains, which is 30, 40, 50 minutes of extra code written a day of high value code. Now, that's just the start of things, right? That's pre-agents. Yeah. So now we've got agents working inside our company. So we've got agents that helping migrate data from one place to another place. And so one example of that was we had a squad of 4 engineers that essentially were doing these repeat tasks, and they were taking about 6 weeks end to end as a cycle of work to take a data source and put it into the new location. We now have that same squad down to 2 humans, along with 4 agents, software agents, and these agents now are doing a lot of that sort of scanning the code, scanning the source, writing the Python code, testing the Python code, evaluating that, and then productionizing it. And we're now seeing that 6 weeks now happen in less than 4 days. So, and then that's now, we've been doing that for several months. And so we can see that. And of course, that's just the start as well, right? We're now looking at the whole software delivery lifecycle, the SDLC, from writing requirements through to cycling in production and reimagining how to build software, with giant coding coming in and ideations happening at a whole new different pace, which means you don't need a software engineer to ideate things, that unlocks a whole host of things. So it's probably going to be, I think it's number 2 on my list. If global knowledge is number 1, we've solved that through the likes of the technologies that have been with ChatGPT led and all the others that have come. Software is the second one that's going to be the biggest impact, and we're pretty excited about what that means. We're going to be able to do a lot more with the engineers we've got, higher order functions, higher activity. So we're pretty excited.
We're pretty excited about it as well. And I think a few years ago, probably about, 6 or 7 years ago, I remember going into Westpac and we were talking about the Power Platform. And we had this concept of Microsoft called citizen development, and nearly everyone that was in FSI told me off for saying it, right? We're not going to have someone in the contact center who's building apps, right? It's just not going to happen. It's like, yeah, but we've got all this governance. And just the message just didn't land. And I think here we are, fast forwarding 6 years, into the future from that point. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, hang on a minute. We've really sorted out all the governance and controls. We've now got this vibe coding and this ability, because natural language is going to be the predominant programming language moving forward over the next few years. We've actually got now the ability to unlock that. And Microsoft released a product called Planner about 12 months ago. It just went GA a few weeks ago. And it's phenomenal when you bring all this together, and the ability to be able to, just prompt to build an app, build a data model, give it a couple of images, and it'll build a UI. I think we're really onto something here, even if it's just inside of a large organization like Westpac, even if it's just there to prototype apps, it's still a massive acceleration on innovation, just that product in itself. So I think, David, it's going to be a really interesting world over the next sort of 12 months, 2 years, as the AI models get more mature and the tooling gets more mature. Pretty much anyone can be a developer inside the bank at some point in time if they've got access to the right tools and they've got the right idea and the right business process that they want to go and solve. So looking forward to see what happens over the next few years.
Have you resisted going back and telling those folks, told you so?
That's next statement.
Invite
them on the podcast and then catch them,
Because Westpac were one of the first adopters of the Power Platform.
Yes, they were.
I remember early in the days. We'll kind of point. It was one of those things. So thank you for that. First of all, we used to foresee the vision, but you mentioned before those numbers are staggering. Yeah, 6 weeks into 4 days, and working with agents and stuff like that. That's I'm still blown away at some of the ROI. The business case really stacks up for some of that stuff. So it's just an exciting time. So
look, and we get asked, what was going to happen to those engineers, and look, I'm on the camp that says clearly there's not enough software engineers in the world, because today there's still a level of discipline around building proper systems, and I think their roles will change, and I think their roles will continue to change more dramatically. But the idea of building a system still requires a mindset, and I think software engineers are really perfectly aimed at doing that. As long as the engineers are prepared to adapt and adopt it, I think the engineers that do are going to be very valuable, that are AI literate, as opposed to those that aren't. So that's my encouragement to all our engineers is get in there, understand it, embrace it, because you've got to be far more valuable. And right now you're going to be able to deliver a lot more quality for us. And you're going to be able to help people that aren't really able to string a whole system together. You're going to be able to help them get to where we need to. So I think it's still a really important role for software engineers in the world ahead, but their role will change for sure.
And of course, it doesn't matter what enterprise you go into, the backlog on apps traditionally has been tremendous, maybe 12 and 14 months worth of backlog.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a more combined role with software engineers and the business together, kind of. I don't know if it's solving like vibe, kind of working together to solve the same business problem, but having tools to be able to be clear on how to get to an outcome faster.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think the world. Look, this is a bit crystal ball-y and prediction-like, so it may or may not happen. But I can imagine that list of what we would all traditionally call commodity code or commodity products start to shrink down. So there'll be a narrow list of things that we truly look at as commodity, and we just get that in. And, things like Office 365, we're not going to build that, right? It's always going to be something you want to bring in and that. But there'll be a fringe products today that may be considered you buy today, but actually we might want to code that ourselves or build that ourselves for us because we want to build it our way for us, for our use cases, and we might want to do that. We would have never done that before, but now we might have that ability. So I can see us building more and probably moving more into those product areas that may have been a little bit more commodity and start creating them. So then you build a more bespoke environment, unique for your customers, unique for your employees, exactly what you want to differentiate on. And as I came back to the beginning, we want to create those deeper customer relations. Well, to do that, you really want to target exactly what you want. And so to do that more and have more power to do that, to allow our engineers and our people across the bank to do that, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. And I think, traditionally we've looked at a whole bunch of use cases in FSI, and a lot of them might have been Access databases or Excel spreadsheets, kind of turned into an application that was used by a lot of people. And it's like, we want to turn that into an app, but we just can't get the business case. And then we would go in and go, well, let's look at low code. Maybe we can get a business case with Power Apps or something like that. And maybe we can't get a business case for that. But those use cases now, some of them are looking likely to be an agent. And an agent, the cost to build and everything like this, could be a lot less.
Yeah.
So I can see a lot of use cases just going down that path of, an agentic kind of application. Maybe it's a combination of both, but we will be able to solve those problems that you just probably couldn't solve before. You just couldn't get them.
Yeah, in any organization, and you have a long tail of things that don't quite today make the grade for being important enough to develop, and they sit in this funny, environment that's in between, full-fledged, we can fund it as an application and we'll put dedicated people to it, versus it's still important, but, it's and so I think that means that our tail will be smaller. We'll be able to stretch further down. We'll either be able to vibe code and then, possibly take that vibe code and productionize that even and allow, much more agent-based development to build out some of those capabilities that, as you said, traditionally were probably user-developed rather than technology-developed.
David, changing it up a little bit, have you got any advice for any aspiring technical leaders that might be listening into the podcast and thinking that they'd like to work in the industry and really make an impact?
Yeah, look, I would say if you want to move into this space, I think the first thing is always be inquisitive. Never stop learning. Listen to some great podcasts. Do you know any that you'd recommend?
I reckon we know one.
Right, that was a leading question there. But number one, definitely be learning.
Love the plug.
Always learning, be curious, question everything. Don't rely on the past, continue to go that way. I think my second thing I'd say is, always surround yourself by the smartest people. Whether that's been a leader or even join the smartest teams in the bank, you'll learn from smart people. Be humble to realize that you're not the smartest person. In fact, it's always good not to be the smartest person and do that. And I think the third thing, if I was going to offer you another one, would be make sure you get good at leading without power. There's a lot of people that like to, in the current day, a lot of people want to create a power and create that sort of empire. But I think the real power comes from influencing and communicating and being really, really good at that. And being able to get on a podcast and explain your story is one good start.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with that. I think it was Jeff Bezos said that if you're the smartest person in the room, find another room.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that advice.
I think it was.
Yeah.
Someone will probably someone probably message me and go with someone else, but I'm pretty sure it was him. And great advice.
I'm sure you could find Bezos or Jobs or any of those guys would have a quote.
It'll be one of them.
Yeah. We've heard that from a few people, but
I hope it wasn't Bill Gates. Otherwise, I'll just
you'll have an email in the inbox before you know.
Your access is cut. Yeah.
So what trends do you think, we've only got a few more minutes, David, so we're pretty interested in, what trends you think in the tech industry are really underestimated right now? Is there anything you could think of that we should be looking at?
Look, it's one of those interesting things. Clearly, I'll just say, given we've spoken about AI pretty much the whole time today, I think there's a lot of people out there still saying artificial intelligence is overhyped, and there's a risk around that because all technology that's like this, that's new, is always overhyped. The question is, picking the ones that are going to be real. And I just say to everyone, there's no doubt that this is real. So don't underestimate that this is coming, because I'm sure there'll be some people still sitting back thinking it's overhyped and why should I pay attention to it? So I'd say this is definitely a trend that absolutely needs to be followed and pursued. Some of the others, though, I think we're at this unusual point where AI is going to unlock a lot of other capabilities that we just don't even know today, right? So as ChatGPT 5 and other capabilities come out that are closer to a really super AI engines that can solve other problems, and so we're going to see a whole host of other things just appear because these technologies are inventing other ways of solving these really big problems. So I think so that's more unconventional, left field things that are unlocked from AI. And so keep a close eye on these things that are maybe going to accelerate some breakthroughs. But if I give you something a bit more, one last one that maybe is a little bit more tangible that probably not enough people are talking about yet, are all in the robotics space, particularly humanoid robots. I think we're going to probably see the acceleration of them. And, if there's enough, NVIDIA and Elon Musk and others are out there talking a little bit about that, but it all seems a little bit science fiction right now. And it's probably not talked enough about in corporate world what that means. 1 billion humanoid robots on the planet, within the next N number of years, 2, 3, 4, 5. What would that mean? How does that mean for every organization? What does that look like?
Yeah.
And I think that's been those sorts of breakthroughs as we plant a brain that's driven by artificial intelligence inside these humanoid robots that could create a whole host of new unlocks as well that we should all be thinking about. What does that mean across lots of different industries and sectors, I'd say.
It's interesting because you could say the robots could come as the maturity of an agent or a personal assistant or something like that. We were coming up with this use case last night around banking, which I thought was really interesting, is if we got to a point where we had ASI agents assigned to us, I could pretty much point it at all the big four banks and go, can you renegotiate my mortgage every 3 months, whatever the best rate is? And it could connect with the Westpac agent and they could negotiate on my behalf, kind of like a broker-to-broker relationship. That would be really interesting too for consumers.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, Scott.
Never came to fruition.
It's very interesting you mentioned that. As one of our Growth Labs experiments right now is looking at that sort of futuristic use case and story about what if we did get agents talking to us rather than humans, and how do we interact with them? So we've actually got in the Growth Labs world right now spinning up an experiment around exactly that scenario so that we understand if and when it comes what we would do.
And I guess it's probably not too far away. I mean, the new ChatGPT agents looks really good. The Copilot Studio agents is fantastic. The ability to be able to say, hey, can you just go and do this? And it connects to, the Westpac agent and solves that problem. Or maybe there's an issue and it just goes and resolves it for you.
Yes.
Yep.
That represents a fantastic customer service,
100%.
I would say, because it's working this on your behalf while you're at work or doing what you're
100%.
So
and
that would be really interesting.
And I think, some of the other things that we as technologists and thought leaders in this space need to think about is what's going to happen to the internet? What's going to happen to social media? What's going to happen to the mobile phone? All these things that are part of our everyday today may morph into something very different in the future. We've already seen on the internet traffic change dramatically in the last 6 months with the advent of generative AI locking people into those ecosystems, solving those problems, which means traffic's not going to websites as much as they used to and things like that. Bots generating content on the internet now is, last year it was over half the content that was generated on the internet was through bots, and 30% of those were bad bots, creating not particularly positive content for the world. And so when you start looking at those sorts of stats and thinking, well, what does that mean for the internet? What was the thing that we're very familiar with? How will that look? And therefore, as a business, as a company that uses an internet as a part of the interface and a protocol for interacting, if that's not something that people are going to use as in the same way anymore, how do we prepare for that? And as I said, same with social media sites or same with mobile phone. And there's a whole long list of things that are probably going to change as a result of AI. And we're all going to have to get ready for that. We're going to have a position on that, and we're going to have to start to think, how do we get ready for that? Just to your example, we're going to have to get ready for an agent coming to talk to us and ask us to do things on someone's behalf. How do we validate that that's a person behind that it's really Scott? How are you going to authorize that? Are you going to, what's the entitlement right? So there's a whole list of things to solve to make that use case work successfully and safely and securely at scale.
Yes.
And we all need to be getting ready for those and other things that are potentially coming. Yeah.
Yeah, and would you trust an agent to buy something on your behalf? That's something I don't think anyone's really thought about at the moment.
Yeah.
You'd almost need like an agent bank account in that case that just had limited funds just in case it went crazy and spent all your money. You wouldn't want to give it access to your bank.
Well, we do know some of these can hallucinate and can get confused on goals and all sorts of things like that. So clearly the guardrails, and I know that's a very overused term and used to hide a whole host of things that you have to actually technically do, but we do need to ensure that the safety elements are built into these systems for the customers, for the employee, for the world, for society to operate successfully. Because you don't want too many early failures, because confidence would drop, right? So we've got to make sure we hit the ground running when these things are ready and do them at the right scale, but safely. Yeah.
I feel like there'll always be a human in the middle with that kind of thing, approving something or some kind of governance two-factor or something when that comes to fruition.
I think we will need to keep those things very much that way.
So last question, David, before we will let you go. It's been fantastic, mind you, getting your insights and having a chat. And thanks so much for coming on to the podcast. If anyone's aspiring to be a CTO in the banking industry, any top tips other than the tips you've already given us?
Top tips for becoming a CTO. Well, those three that I gave before definitely are a CTO tips as well. But if I was going to add one more, I think be ready for change. You're going to be probably at the front and center of how explaining this sort of massive amount of change that's coming into the organization. So being able to understand it, appreciate it, and then help people see it, because some of these changes are hard for people that are non-technology people to see what it means for them and how to apply it. And so a good CTO has to be great at being able to take those in and then communicate them back out. And so that would be the thing I'd leave with you.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. Fantastic. Well, thanks, David. You're always welcome to come back on the podcast whenever you're ready to give us another update. It was fantastic having you on, and looking forward to seeing some of these insights that come to fruition if they do, and supporting any initiatives that Westpac have.
Thanks, Matt. It's been great to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for tuning in to Powertime, your source for practical insights across Microsoft AI, low-code and digital transformation. Just a reminder, this podcast does not represent the official views of Microsoft. The opinions shared are those of our guests and hosts. If you found value in today's episode, share it on LinkedIn. Drop us a rating on Apple or Spotify, and subscribe on YouTube for more. You can also check out our full archive and behind-the-scenes updates at powertime.au and on Substack. And finally, If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, please don't hesitate to reach out. In Australia, you can contact Lifeline on 13 11 14 or Kids Helpline on 1800 55 1800. You're not alone. Help is always available. See you next time.